Welcome, everyone, to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 20 of the 2024 podcast series, where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft. And this is the post-Combine edition, if you will. We're going to have two podcasts back-to-back, really breaking down who stood out at the Combine for both the good and the bad. And we're going to start with the defense, because defense, look, they were showcased Thursday and Friday. Next podcast, we'll take a look at the offense after that, with the exception of the tight ends. They were thrown in with the defensive backs, so we'll cover them today as well. And then we'll get into the quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, O-line, and the specialists in episode 21. Now, obviously, when we first started things out, we had the defensive line. Edge rushers, defensive tackles, and I'll tell you what, if we start with this, Dallas Turner, we'll get to him with the linebackers. You know, that's first and foremost, because he had an exceptional combine. But I think when you look at the edge rushers, obviously the two that are going to come to mind are Verse and Laiatu Latu. I think these are two guys that checked off the boxes, that they are indeed first rounders that should be drafted, very high in the first 20 to 25 picks, with Verse having a chance to possibly crack the top 10. When you look at Verse, 6'4", 254, the comparisons that they're making to Will Anderson, you look at similar size. But look, when you're talking about a guy with 33.5-inch arms, putting up 31 reps in the bench press, then he goes out and runs a 4.58 40 with a 1.6 10-yard split, with 35-inch vertical leap. There's some explosiveness to this guy that a lot of people, look, you talk about the speed to power. Everybody talks about his power game. He doesn't bend nearly enough. But this guy has not only the power and strength, we knew that, and that checks off the box here, but I thought he had much more explosiveness, much more speed than anyone was expecting, can bend a little bit more than people were expecting. I mean, these numbers, are comparable to what we saw out of Myles Garrett when he was drafted number 1 overall by the Cleveland Browns. And I think Verse absolutely checks off all the boxes. To me, he could go as high as 8 to Atlanta, although I think with Atlanta, especially if they're continuing to run that 34 defense, I think Dallas Turner makes more sense there. But I look at a team like Chicago sitting there at number 9. You want to pair up a defensive end to team with Montez Sweat, Verse could be your guy. Minnesota, same thing. What happens with Danielle Hunter? Looks like he's on his way out. They need an edge rusher desperately. Verse will be a great fit there as well. So I don't see him getting past Minnesota there at 11. I think he's checked off all the boxes. He looks like a definitive top 15 player. Then you look at Laiatu Latu. Look, 6'5", 259, arm length, well over 32 inches, runs a 4.6, 440. And he showed off the bend. People weren't talking about whether or not, could he really bend. And again, the explosiveness is the best pure pass rusher in the draft, and he looked so smooth. The hand usage is something that I think he's really well known for. You got to see the bend. Again, people talk about that all the time, and you really got to see that in a lot of the drills. But then also they had a lot of those side-to-side drills, the wave drill. And this was a guy that was able to plant and move and explode and change directions in a hurry. Just so smooth, so quick. And to me, Latu, obviously the medicals, I haven't heard anything that's come out against him. I think this is another guy that could go as high as 12 to Denver if they don't look for a quarterback in round number 1. But I look at the Saints at number 14. That makes a lot of sense as well. I look at the Dolphins there at number 21. Look, I know the Dolphins are going to potentially be on the market for an interior lineman, but when you have Jalen Phillips already on the roster, then you have Bradley Chubb, who went down to that ACL tear, and then Andrew Van Ginkel is a free agent, may not be back. You're going to need somebody to pair with Phillips, especially if Chubb, coming back from that injury. When is he going to be back? Is he going to be 100%? What's that going to be looking like? So I think that's something that there's a decision that has to be made. Look, he tore that knee on January 1st. So when you think about that, Chubb may not be ready. And so I think with Latu, that's another spot. And then Houston. I think he doesn't get past Houston there at 23. Look, if you can pair up Will Anderson Jr. with Laiatu Latu, then D'Amico Ryans is going to be grinning from ear to ear, getting that defense and that pass rush really firing on all cylinders. So again, Latu had a great day there at the defensive end position for sure. Beyond that, look, there are some other guys that were definite standouts at the defensive end position. I think one of the guys that stood out to me obviously was Chop Robinson, 6'3", 254. I think this guy still is going to be a stand-up outside linebacker, but man, that 4.48 40 for a guy over 250 pounds. I want to say that was a combine record. Ran a 4.25 short shuttle. 10.8 prod jump, again at 6'3", 254. The explosive, that explosive first step, we knew we were going to be seeing that. And then he runs that 1.54 10-yard split to go along with that 4.48. Just freakishly fast. We knew that. And that's ultimately, he was the reason why Michigan ran the ball 32 times in that game against Penn State, where, look, after the first 2 plays, they knew we can't block Chop Robinson. Completely changed the whole complexion of that game. A lot of people want to give J.J. McCarthy a hard time. Why wasn't he used more often? Well, it's because Chop Robinson completely changed the game there. He's one of those guys, to me, the production wasn't necessarily there. It's just more on potential and that raw talent. So when I look at Chop, I think ultimately, Houston at 23 makes a lot of sense. I think the other spot is going to be Tampa. Obviously with Shaq Barrett, free agent, that makes a lot of sense as well. So I think Chop Robinson, obviously going to be that first rounder. So we have 4 defensive ends. I'm sorry, those 3, and then I throw in Dallas Turner as the 4th. Again, we're going to talk about him when we get to the linebackers, but those 4 guys solidify themselves as first rounders. Is there anybody else in this group that would be a first round pick? I think the next guy is Darius Robinson at 6'5", 285, 34.5-inch arms, ran a 4.95 40. That was a little surprising. Look, 35-inch vertical leap for a guy that's 285 pounds. That's definitely, definitely was eye-popping, I thought, for sure. A guy that size, that actually tied him with Jared Verse at that 35-inch vertical leap. That was tied for 7th among all of the defensive ends, and actually had a higher vertical leap than Mohamed Kamara, Chop Robinson, Austin Booker, even Laiatu Latu. So, when you think about it, there is some of that lower body explosiveness. You do see that with the way that he that speed to power, a lot of that game. We saw him in the Senior Bowl. That 4.95 40, is that going to scare teams away down there at the end of round number 1? The production was absolutely there. This was a guy that continually got to the quarterback and was making plays, and the versatility as well. This is a guy that can play end, he can play tackle, you can play him outside, and then on third downs, kick him inside. Wherever you want to line him up, I think he'll be explosive for you. Look, 8.5 sacks this past season, 14 tackles for loss. I don't see him getting out of round number 1. I think, I know the Ravens re-signed Justin Madubuike, but that would still be a spot. I think you look at the Lions there at 29. I think they could potentially use an edge rusher to team with a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, and then potentially the Chiefs. What's happening with Chris Jones? He hasn't re-signed just yet, but when you think about that with Chris Jones, even then, you team the 2 of them up in the middle, that'd be a formidable duo there in KC. So I think there are a lot of options there for Darius Robinson in round number 1. I also wouldn't be surprised if he falls to the early part of round number 2 because of that 40 time. But again, trust the tape, in a lot of respects with Darius Robinson, because this is the guy he's going to use that length to his advantage. A lot of that, a lot of game is power, but you see some of that quickness coming off the ball as well. And so he's a guy to me that, he's going to win, a lot on the interior. He could be a 5 technique. And again, that versatility, gives him a lot of options. I thought Marshawn Kneeland looked pretty smooth. 6'3", 267, 34.5-inch arms, so he uses that to his advantage for sure. Ran a 4.75, but with a 1.66 10-yard split, not the most explosive of those times. But again, I thought he looked really smooth. Ran a 702 3-cone drill, 418. Short shuttle. Both of those were the fastest of the DNs that ran in both of those. And so when you think about that, you think about the change of direction. You think about his bend. Marshawn Nealon, actually, he absolutely has that, and I think he wins with a lot of leverage. He wins with the power to his game. He uses that length to his advantage. He's a guy to keep an eye out for sure. Mohamed Kamara, look, he's undersized, at 6'1", 248. Look, so was Elvis Dumerville. And Elvis Dumerville was a damn good edge rusher. And I think Mohamed Kamara has the ability to be able to do just that. Ran a 4.57 40, 1.58 10-yard split. This is a guy that I think is going to be on that fringe. I think he's going to be between a 3rd and 4th round pick. Because he has that ability to get after the quarterback. You watch the effort. That's one of the things that you love with Mohamed Kamara. And look, he flashed quite a bit in the East-West Shrine game as well. So I think he did looked really solid, and he's a guy that I think is going to be right there in that conversation at the edge rush spot. There are other guys. Look, Jalix Hunt, measured in at 6'4", 252. 37.5-inch vertical leap, ran a 4.64. I thought Cedric Johnson, at 6'3", 260. This was a guy that, both Hunt and Cedric Johnson over 33-inch arms. Jalix Hunt actually with 34 and 3/8 inch. But Cedric Johnson, I thought, looked a little bit stiff at times coming off the edge, but you see the explosiveness. Ran a 4.63 40 with a 1.61 10-yard split, a 38-inch vertical leap. So there's a lot of athleticism there and a lot to like when you're watching Cedric Johnson play. So I think that'll send teams back to the film, when you watch him. Another guy, Miles Cole, at 6'6", 278. This dude has nearly a 37-inch arm. I mean, that's absolutely insane. 4.67 40, 35-inch vertical leap. I mean, for a guy that size running a 4.67, that turned some heads for sure. And so I think when I look at Miles Cole, the production doesn't match the potential. So you have to really ask yourself where you're going to be taking this guy. He'll be a day 3 pick, but he's going to be a guy that I think is going to be taken sooner than a lot of people expect, because there is that athleticism. Xavier Thomas, look, battling injuries. We know that he's undersized at 6'2", 244, but ran a 4.62 40. You saw some explosiveness, put up 225 26 times in the bench press. So he's another guy to be mindful of and keep an eye out for. Then the flip side, some of the guys that didn't have the best day. Braylon Trice showed up at 6'3.5", 245 pounds, so much lighter than expected. And I think he's really looking to be that 34 outside linebacker. But he runs a 4.72. Really surprising there. Then he had to repeat a lot of drills. So obviously, following direction, that's going to be a huge concern for teams. So Braylon Trice, to me, was a guy that I think was trying to knock on the door in the first round. I think because of that, because of his performance there at the Combine, teams are really going to want to dive in and into those interviews and dive into the film a little bit more. Watch him at his pro day, see how is he able to recover. But I thought that performance kind of has me leaning Braylon Trice day 2 of the draft, and I just don't see him popping back into round 1. Adisa Isaac at 6'4", 247. I was expecting him to be one of the more explosive guys coming off the ball in that 40. Ran a 4.74. I was expecting to see a little bit quicker time. Ran a 1.64 10-yard split as well, so not nearly as explosive as I was expecting. But still looks smooth in the drills. You see the athleticism. That's something that was absolutely on display. But then you look at Austin Booker, 6'4.5", 240 pounds. This was the guy that I think was kind of the darling, if you will. Played only 1 year of real meaningful college football. Transferred from Minnesota to Kansas, had 8 sacks on the year for the Jayhawks, and looked like a guy that he was only a redshirt sophomore. It really would have behooved him to come back to Lawrence for one more year, but as it stands, ran a 4.79 40. That was certainly surprising. That was the slowest by anybody other than Darius Robinson, and he weighs a good 45 pounds lighter than Darius Robinson. Then he goes and has a 32.5-inch vertical leap, which is among the lowest of any of the defensive ends who are making those vertical leaps. So I think that's definitely cause for concern, because you see the athleticism, you see the power in his game as well, his ability to drive guys back into the backfield. We saw that at the Senior Bowl. So it's just one of those things to where, okay, there is a lot of potential to him. What happened here, what happened at the Combine, I think that's going to send some people back and take a look at the film a little bit further. So those were the guys that I thought that stood out one way or the other at the defensive end spot, which takes us to our defensive tackles. And the defensive tackles, look, this is a group. There are some studs in this group, led by Byron Murphy. Look, 6'1", 297 pounds. Ran a 4.87 40 with a 1.69 10-yard split, 33-inch vertical leap, put up 225 28 times, and man, what can you say about Murphy except the 4-bag drill? He gets out on the turn, excellent. Gets out and goes in a hurry. Very quick feet going over the bags. Change of direction is absolutely there, and you see that. You see that time and time again with him. The ability to win with an explosive first step. Quick, slap, rip, or a quick chop and an arm over, and gets into the backfield in a hurry, pressures the quarterback. The ability to stack, shed, come down the line, and drop a running back right around the line of scrimmage. You saw that time and time again from Murphy, and he proved why he is the #1 defensive tackle. Could he go as high as Minnesota at 11? I think there's a possibility because Minnesota is in need of interior linemen. But when you look at the quarterback spot, you look at the edge rush spot, I think those are the two main areas that Minnesota should be focusing on. I look at the Raiders at 13, another team that's going to be interested in a quarterback. You could also make an argument that they could go offensive tackle. And then you look at the cornerback spot. They need somebody to pair up with Jack Jones, so Quinyon Mitchell, who we'll talk about here in a minute. I think there's a possibility that we could see Quinyon Mitchell taken there at number 13 overall. But look, they also need that interior presence, and I think Byron Murphy will be a nice spot there. Leonard Williams likely on the way out in Seattle. I think that would be a great spot for him as well. So there are a lot of teams where we could see Byron Murphy come off the board. I think really we could probably see him, I'd say Houston as a possibility, although he doesn't really fit that profile in a D'Amico Ryans type of defense. But there are a lot of teams that'll be interested in Murphy. I think he still stays in that top 25. Johnny Newton sat out with an injury, so obviously we're going to be looking to his pro day, see how he runs. I really only think there are going to be 2 defensive tackles taken on day 1 of the draft. When I mentioned T'Vondre Sweat previously, and I wanted to see how well T'Vondre Sweat moved. Look, he measured in at 6'4.5", 366 pounds. Big human is what I wrote down, and he carries it very well. He moved very well. Still a 26-inch vertical leap with that size, is absolutely ridiculous. And he was actually able to outjump somebody, a couple of guys that at that nose tackle position where he was a good 30-40 pounds heavier than. I don't think he's a guy that's going to end up in round number 1 though, because when you're thinking about guys that were taken in the first part of round number 1, you're talking about Dontari Poe, you're talking about Vita Vea, you're talking about Jordan Davis. Look, Jordan Davis, Dontari Poe, sub 5, with weighing over 330 pounds, and then you look at Vita Vea, he ran a 5'1". Vince Wilfork, at 6'1", 338 pounds, I want to say, back in, the 2004 draft? I can't remember exactly, how far back that one goes. But, Vince Wilfork ran a 5'08". I think the closest that we have is Elodie Ngata, the number 12 overall selection. But with that, he ran a 5'16". At 6'6" and 330 pounds. So when you think about T'Vondre Sweat at 366 pounds, running that 5'7", is there a possibility he could sneak into the latter part of round number 1? I think there's a possibility, but to me he's going to be an early to mid second round pick, but a nose tackle that definitely is explosive for his size, a short area burst. definitely something that I think teams are definitely going to be talking about. Exactly where do we put this guy? Where should we be drafting him? Where should he be on our draft board? That's going to be a big question mark with T'Vondre Sweat. But yeah, I mean, at 366 pounds to move the way that he does, he's a big man, big individual, and those were three guys that definitely stood out to me. I thought Dwayne Carter had a great combine. 6'2", 302, ran a 4.9940. Look, this is a guy that continually was running over guys. He ran over Tanner Bortolini at the Senior Bowl. You saw him do it against Florida State. You saw it multiple times against UNC. Ran over the center and gave chase to Drake May. And then you watch, like the 4-bag drill, the agility, just so smooth. That was another guy that I thought really had some eye-popping, just athleticism that I wasn't really expecting. But I'm kind of burying the lead here with defensive tackles. The biggest standout of them all had to be Braden Fisk. I think this was a guy that we weren't sure, was he going to be a second rounder, was he going to be a third rounder? He solidified his status as a second round pick. He's my number 4 defensive tackle in this group. So fluid as an athlete. You watched him with the 4-bag drill, so athletic. You saw the change of direction, his ability to plant and go, quickness, quick feet going over the bags. You watched him with his ability to bend, and man, when he flattens out, he gets to you in a hurry. But then you also remember, I think one of the highlights of the combine was when he ran that 40, and he runs a 4.78 40 with a 1.68 10-yard split. Think about that. That's moving, man. And at the end of that, at 6'4", 292, by the way, and then you hear, "Oh yeah." And I think that got everybody going. It was pretty cool to hear. But then he runs the 4.37 short shuttle. And so you see that athleticism definitely on display. And look, he plays with passion. He plays with emotion. And you see the quickness and that motor. He plays with his hair on fire. Yeah, Braden Fisk to me solidified his status as a second-round pick and my number 4 defensive tackle. But he wasn't the only one. I think Chris Jenkins out of Michigan, 6'3", 299, 34-inch arms, some of the longer arms in this draft class at the D tackle position, ran a 4.9 140. Look, that was faster than Darius Robinson. And when you watch him in the drills, I thought there were times where he was a little out of control, but the athleticism is absolutely there. You can definitely see that. Brandon Dorlus, 6'3", 283. He's a bit of a tweener. Is he a guy that's going to be a 5 technique? Is he going to play? Where does he line up if it's an even man front? But 6'3", 283 and ran a 4.85 40 with a 1.68 10-yard split. So he and Fisk, again, that 10-yard split, that's really what jumped off. The only guy to go faster was Rukaroro out of Clemson, 6'4", 294, 34-inch arms. Another guy who looked incredibly smooth, incredibly explosive going over the bags. Put up 225, 29 times as well. With those long arms, that's pretty darn impressive. Very smooth, turn and go. Rukaroro going to be an early day 2 pick for me as well. So these were definitely the standouts, I would say. And then one other guy to mention, obviously, is Mekhi Wingo. This guy covered a lot of ground on the wave drill. He was side to side. You just watched the athleticism and just how quick he was able to go over the bags on the 4-bag agility drill. Again, 6', 284, so he's undersized, but ran a 4.85 40. I'm sorry, he was the one that actually had the fastest 10-yard split at a 1.64. So the explosiveness is absolutely there. He's definitely undersized, so I think that's going to limit some of his draft stock. But you're going to get a guy who's going to be very explosive, a guy that's going to get up the field in a hurry, and I think there's a lot of potential there with Mekhi Wingo. Some of the guys on the opposite end of the spectrum with this, watching Keith Randolph, 6'3", 296, I thought looked very stiff, didn't look overly athletic. He got stuck on the turn and go on the 4-back agility. That was disappointing to see. I thought Leonard Taylor, ran a 5.1240 at 6'3", 303, which was solid. But again, the athleticism, I was expecting a little bit more from him. Just didn't quite see enough there. McKinley Jackson, at 6'1", 326, ran a 5.2640. Only a 23-inch vertical leap, just limited from an athletic standpoint. I was really surprised that he had to actually stop over, and start over his rep on the agility drill. Very stiff. That was something that I was pretty surprised with. Gabe Hall as well showed off some stiffness. There were some pauses in his movements with a lot of that change of direction. At 6'6", 291, ran a 5.0340, but it was that side-to-side movement where he really struggled. That was really the big thing for me. Look, Dwayne Carter, I mentioned that he looked so smooth in a lot of the drills. Ran that 3-cone drill in a 7.95, which was the slowest among the D tackles that ran it. Ran a 4.75 short shuttle, which was on the lower end as well in terms of that group. So very good with the straight ahead. Struggles a little bit with that change of direction. And then my surprises. Jaden Crumity out of Mississippi State, 6'4", 301, ran a 4.9740, 1.69, 10-yard split. Much quicker, better athlete than I was expecting to see. So I think that definitely bodes well for him with his draft stock. That was definitely a nice surprise. And then Mason Smith, 6'5", 306, 35-inch arms. And ran a 5.0140. Looked pretty smooth in the drills as well. Big athletic dude. He's coming back from the injury. That's really the biggest thing. And to run that 5.01, I think it's saying that he's back. The athleticism is back, and he's a guy that I think will only continue to get better. And so I think he's a guy that either late 3, early 4. He'll be a guy that I think teams will jump on. And then the last two guys that I really want, that I want to mention, Tyler Davis out of Clemson, 6'2", 301, shortest arms of this group at 31 3/8 inches, ran a 5.0240. Change of direction though, was a bit of a concern, especially in that short shuttle. Ran a 5 flat short shuttle, which was the slowest among the D tackles that ran it, but put up that 29 reps in the bench press. So showcase some good strength, good initial quickness, that initial burst. Change of direction was a bit of a surprise, so I was expecting to see a little bit more there. And then one last guy to mention was Logan Lee. 6'4", 301. He's all about athleticism, right? It's because he's not the biggest guy by any means, but ran a 5.0540, and then duplicated that short shuttle 4.37 that Braden Fisk ran. Also ran a 7.16 3-cone drill. So the change of direction was absolutely there, and you saw that in the wave drill. You saw that in the bag drill as well, and so he's the guy that I think will have people continuing to go back to the film, want to take another look there at Logan Lee. He'll be a late day 3 guy, I think, if he gets drafted. But again, I thought that the showing at least needed to be called out because he did definitely have a good day for himself. Which takes us to the linebackers. Dallas Turner. Let's talk about Dallas Turner, shall we? 6'3", 247, 34 3/8 inch arms. We've got these long arms, right? Ran a 4.4640 with a 1.54 10-yard split. And then the 40.5-inch vertical leap. You saw the explosiveness. To me, when I look at the athleticism, that screams, Atlanta at 8. Look, I know that they may want to flirt with taking a corner to pair up with AJ Terrell. I know that the quarterback position, to me, I think they need to go after a veteran because they're really a quarterback away from really contending in that NFC South. But they've been needing that edge rusher, that premier edge rusher, and I think Dallas Turner could be that guy in that 34 defense there in the ATL. But the other standouts, I think Edgerrin Cooper and Payton Wilson. When you talk about off-ball linebackers, those were the two standouts for me above everybody else. Cooper, 6'2", 230, 34-inch arms, so he's got more length than Payton Wilson. Ran a 4.5 140 with a 1.54 10-yard split. Looked explosive. You saw the change of direction. You saw him cover a lot of distance. You saw just the fluidity in his hips. This is a guy that I think not only will play sideline to sideline, he's going to be, we saw the blitzing capabilities as well from him. This was a year, what was it, 8.5 sacks. You saw the instincts getting outside. Athleticism definitely checked the box off as well. This is a guy that can also drop into coverage and make plays on the outside. My favorite guy, though, in the linebacker group is Payton Wilson. And I have already said this, that if it hadn't been for the injuries, we could see him potentially as another Jack Campbell in this year's draft. 6'4", 233. So definitely didn't meet the height and weight that Jack Campbell had. Jack Campbell had 6'4" and 5'8", 249, but the arm length. Payton Wilson had 30.5-inch arms. Campbell 31 and 7/8. Campbell runs that 4.65, 159, 10-yard split, 37.5-inch vertical leap. So when you look at what Payton Wilson did, again, 6'4", 233, shorter arms, ran that 4.43 with the 154 10-yard split. The vertical leap at 34.5 inches. Campbell had him, a little bit there, but Wilson obviously showcasing the speed, and you saw his ability in those drills, the sideline to sideline ability, his ability to stop on a dime and change directions. This is a guy that plays all over the field. He's going to play behind the line of scrimmage. He's going to play on the outside. He's a guy that can drop into coverage as well. The biggest thing is the medicals. I haven't seen anything that has really hit hard in terms of those medicals with Payton Wilson. So to me, I think I had him in round number 3 because of the medicals, and not really sure what that was going to look like. But because we haven't really heard anything about, hey, there's a huge concern there with that shoulder and that knee, I'm looking at second round. As of right now, I think that's really the what makes the most sense. I just hope that he's a guy that can continue to stay healthy, because, man, when he is on and he is healthy, when he's right, he's arguably the best linebacker in this year's drafts, hands down. We didn't get to see Jeremiah Trotter Jr. run. We'll hopefully get to see him run at Clemson's Pro Day, but 6 foot, 228. So I know a little bit on the undersized side, but I expect him to be explosive. Ran a 7.13 3-cone drill. So again, a guy that can change directions on a dime. So that was something that definitely jumped out. I thought that Jordan McGee had a great day. 6'1", 228. People are talking about him out of Temple, but he ran a 4.55 40, another one with that 154 10-yard split, so a guy that definitely stood out. But then when you look at the stats, you go back to the film as well, you see a guy that is explosive, you see a guy that is instinctive, and a guy that can drop into coverage. He was undersized at one point. He was 6'3", 210. In terms of what they had him listed at, it's funny because he's actually 6'1", but he's actually put on some weight. He's now at 228. And look, 31 tackles for loss, 8 sacks in his career, to go along with 10 pass breakups, and back-to-back years with at least 80 tackles. And so this is a guy that can do a little bit of everything, and he's one of those sleepers for sure. When we talk about edge rushers that move with the linebackers, we talked about Dallas Turner, but Gabriel Murphy is the guy to talk about as an early day 3 guy. 6'2", 247, shorter arms again, 30.5 inches. That's going to be a concern coming off the edge, but 4.68 40 and 39.5-inch vertical leap. So you see the explosiveness. This is a guy, look, 8.5 sacks this past year. Also put up 25 reps in the bench press. So in terms of the linebackers, put up the most in the entire group, so that was something that absolutely stood out. I thought, Edifon Olafosio out of Washington, sending guys back to the film for sure. 6'1", 236. So he actually put on a little bit of weight there from where they had him. And 4.56 40, 39.5-inch vertical leap, 10.8 broad jump, which put him at the top of the list for the linebackers. And again, this is a guy that can drop into coverage. We saw that. I've talked about it ad nauseum with the national title game, but that was just a microcosm of what Olafosio can do in against the pass. His ability to cover Roman Wilson, who was in the slot, and he starts on the rush, sees Wilson, stops on a dime, gets to the outside, and this is an out route on a 4th and 2 play, and is able to close the distance, get a hand in right there at the catch point, and knock the pass away to force that turnover on downs. Olafosho, to me, is a guy that's definitely helped his draft stock, and a guy that I could see potentially sneaking into that 4th round range for sure. Trevin Wallace, 6'1", 237, ran a 4.51 40. We knew he was going to be fast. 37.5-inch vertical leap, 10.7 broad jump. Athletic, yes, check. He's a guy that I think could end up coming off the board on day 2, so that was something that definitely stood out for me. Looking at the group, Chris Braswell, 6'3", 251, 33.25-inch arms, another one of the edge rushers, 4'6", 40, 159, 10-yard split. So another guy that I thought checking the box off, good athleticism, and a guy that we're going to be seeing coming off the edge. I thought Cedric Gray had a great day as well, 6'1.5", 234 pounds. You saw his athleticism, his ability to change directions, to see the lateral agility. Ran a 4'6", 440, 35.5-inch vertical leap. And to me, the fluidity there, this is a guy that can drop into coverage. We saw that time and time again, getting enough depth and then being able to read the quarterback's eyes, allow that to take him to the football and make a play on the ball. So that athleticism definitely checks out. You were able to see that there at the Combine. Looking at the group, I think the other direction, some of the guys that didn't have the best day. Junior Colson, I was expecting him to work out, 6'2", 238. We didn't get to see him run. I was expecting to see a little bit from him. Tyron Hopper at 6'2", 231, shorter arms than I think I was expecting with him. He didn't, obviously, he's been battling some injuries, so we didn't get to see him work out. But Mayama Jongmeta out of Wisconsin, 6', 229, ran a 4.91 40, 4.66 short shuttle. This was a guy, look, he got benched there at Wisconsin, but he was definitely their defensive leader, racked up a ton of tackles. I was expecting to see more from him, and really, disappointed in the way that he worked out. He's really, I think, he's going to be an undrafted free agent, I think, when it's all said and done. John Trey Hunter out of Georgia State, 6'2", 236. So he measured in a little bit lower than I think they had him over 240. Only a 9.3 broad jump. We didn't get to see any 40s or anything like that from him. Wanted to see some more of that athleticism out of him for sure. And then some of the surprises. I thought that Nathaniel Watson looked much more athletic than people were giving him credit for. 6'2", 233, 32 and 7/8-inch arms. So arm length shouldn't be a concern, at least. Ran a 4.6, 340 with a 159 10-yard split. 9.3 broad jump, which was kind of weird, but you do see some of that straight ahead, straight line quickness. I think, again, the side to side, that lateral agility, the ability to flip the hips and turn and get into coverage, there is some stiffness there, and I think that's really where he could get himself into trouble. But again, that explosiveness coming off the edge, that checks out with those 10 sacks. So he'll be a day 3 guy, but a guy that could potentially be a situational pass rusher for a team. That's something that I'm definitely looking forward to. I wanted to see Jalen Ford out of Texas run as well, 6'2", 240. He's not the best athlete. That's one of the things that I saw on film. I was expecting to see a little bit more. Wanted to see what he could do there at the Combine, and we just didn't get to see that. So I'll be looking forward to his pro day to see what he could do. 2 other guys that stood out in terms of their 40 times. Curtis Jacobs ran a 4.58 at 6'1" and 241 pounds. Look, he was a guy that seemed to be all over the field there for Penn State. And Kalen DeLoach, again, an undersized guy at 5'11", 210. Really, what position is he going to play? I think that's the big question mark. He ran a 4.47 40, so obviously that's a head turner, and just 1/100th of a second slower than Dallas Turner. Where does that place him? He's going to be one of those guys that, because he is so undersized, he'll struggle to get drafted. But maybe you play him at safety. Maybe he's going to be a special teams guy. But athleticism is definitely there. That checks the box. That was expected. Look, Khalid Duke out of K-State, 6'3", 246, another guy who's going to be an edge rusher, right? Ran a 4.7, 940, a lot slower than I was expecting to see him coming off the edge, so wanted to see a little bit more explosiveness out of him. And then on the flip side, Maris Lufau, I thought looked a lot more athletic than I was expecting, in the drills, and ran a 4.6, 440, 159, 10-yard split, 6'2", 234, 34.25-inch arms. I think his ability to drop into coverage is something that can't be overlooked. So I think that was definitely something that was a surprise for me when I got to watch him play. So then that takes us to Friday's performances. We're going to take a look at the defensive backs and the tight ends real quick. So when we talk about the defensive backs, we got to start with the corners, and then we'll finish with the safeties. And the cornerbacks, obviously, Terrion Arnold was a guy that everyone came to show up to watch. 6 foot, 189 pounds, ran a 4.5 40, which is just fine. This is a guy, look, the athleticism is absolutely there. You see the quickness with his feet. You see the lateral agility. You see such fluid movements with his hips, able to turn and react, able to locate the ball on the deep balls very well. And really any of the change of direction, able to plant, no wasted movement, drive, get his head right there to the football, locate it, and make a play on it. 37-inch vertical leap, 10.9 broad jump. So I think in terms of the explosiveness, that definitely checked out for him. I think the big headliner, though, was Quinyon Mitchell. This is a guy that continues to check off boxes. He's done everything that we've asked of him, right? Everybody wanted to see what Quinyon Mitchell could do. And I've been talking about this guy for the last couple of years. He really was on my radar after his sophomore season. And look, 45 pass breakups, 6 interceptions in his career. Mostly played off man or zone with the Rockets, showcased his ability to play in press man there at the Senior Bowl. Then he shows up at the Combine and just silly. 6 foot, 195, runs a 4.3, 340, 151, 10-yard split, 38-inch vertical leap, and then he also throws up 225 20 times, which was the most of any corner. To me, Quinyon Mitchell, I think, may have actually moved ahead of Terrion Arnold. I thought that he's done everything and that we've asked of him, and you look at him, you look at the ball skills, everything. He's an alpha out there. The athleticism, the strength, everything checks out with what he showcased there at the Combine. I think he's CB1. I've got him ahead of Terrion Arnold now, and he's the guy. Look, if Atlanta wants to take him at 8, I would not be shocked. The big question mark is where's that first corner going to come off the board? It could be a 13 to Vegas. It could be 15 to the Colts. I think Mitchell, though, is definitely a top 15 pick. Cooper DeJean said that it looks like he's going to be able to work out in April. So I think that's something that everyone should be on the lookout for. I think that's going to be something that should be a lot of fun to watch. Max Melton had a tremendous Combine. 5'11", 187, ran a 4.39 40, 151 10-yard split, a 40.5-inch vertical leap, and then 11.4 broad jump, which was the best out of any of the corners. And Melton just looked smooth in the drills. The change of direction was absolutely on point. And Melton, there was questions about whether or not just how athletic was he. Man, he actually showed up. He was very physical and did a great job against Marvin Harrison Jr. I look at Max Melton, and I think there's a chance that we could see him as a second-round pick. Third round, maybe, but definitely a guy that definitely caught my eye for sure, and someone who I think teams should be definitely excited about. I thought Renardo Green out of Florida State had a nice Combine, 6 foot, 186. Arms a little on the shorter end, but ran a 4.49 40, 37.5-inch vertical leap, 10-10 broad jump. He's a guy that I think has really solidified his status as a day 2 corner. Day 1 corners. Let's talk about him, right? Nate Wiggins is another guy at 6'1", only 173 pounds. So you think about those slender corners. We saw that from Emmanuel Forbes, big time playmaker, right? Those 6-pick sixes. Wiggins runs that 4.28 40. We know how teams love that explosiveness. 36-inch vertical leap. What was interesting was it was a 1.59 10-yard split. So the pickup speed, the build-up speed there. He's one of those guys that if he gets beaten, he's a guy that's going to be able to recover and be able to close in a hurry and make a play on the football. So I think Nate Wiggins solidified his status as a first-round corner. I thought Andrew Phillips looked very smooth in the drills. 5'11", 190, ran a 4.8 40, 11.3 broad jump. I look at Andrew Phillips. He's a guy that could sneak his way into round number 3, if not the round 4 at the very latest. Thought that he looked very smooth. Ennis Rakestraw, a guy that I think everybody's looking at as a potential first round corner. 5'11", 183, ran a 4.5 40, 1.54 10-yard split. Just didn't look nearly as explosive than I think everyone was expecting. I know that he battled like that core injury that kept him out of the Senior Bowl. So I'm really excited to see what he could do there at the Missouri Pro Day. That's going to be huge, I think, for him to really solidify his status. Another guy that didn't work out at all was Kool-Aid McKinstry, 5'11", 199. People are going to be looking to that Bama workout. You also want to see what Terrion Arnold looks like. Can he get that 40 time below that 4.5 range? I think that's something that should happen. There's just so many fast corners. I mean, Daquan Hardy showed up. 5'9", 179. He obviously going to be a slot corner, but ran that 4.38 40, 42.5-inch vertical leap. He's a guy that I think definitely helped himself out, as did Kyrie Jackson. Look, 6'4", 194, 32 3/4-inch arms, so a little bit shorter arms than I was expecting for a guy at 6'4". But look, ran a 4.5 40, 1.5 10-yard split, 36.5-inch vertical leap, 11.1 broad jump, and you saw some good, nice fluidity to his game. That was something that definitely jumped out. These bigger corners, DJ James at 6 foot 175, another slender build, but ran that 4.4 240, 1.5 10-yard split. Definitely something that is going to keep him in that day 2 conversation. Another corner that I think is really intriguing is Elijah Jones. People aren't really talking about him. 6'1.5", 185 pounds, ran a 4.44 40, 42.5-inch vertical leap. So the athleticism is absolutely there. When you talk about Elijah Jones and what he was able to do there at BC, this is a guy that locked down Keon Coleman. And when you look at what he did there, 5 interceptions this past season, 7 in his career, 36 pass breakups as well. This is a guy that, the production absolutely there. The athleticism is absolutely there. So I think Elijah Jones definitely solidified his status as one of the better corners in this year's draft. I'm going to be looking to Wake Forest Pro Day. Hopefully Kalen Carson will be able to work out 6 foot 199. He's a guy that I think is in that range. Jarvis Brownlee at 5'10", 194. He didn't work out, but he did the drills. He looked, there were some wasted steps, some wasted movement in some of the drills, which was really surprising because he's that scrappy corner and a guy that looks to get up on you in a hurry. So I was a little bit surprised there with that. I thought Cam Hart looked exceptionally smooth at 6'3", 202, another big corner. 4.5 40, 33-inch arms. So he was definitely a guy that stood out for me. A big corner that just looked so smooth running those drills. Mikey Sanders still at 5'9", 182, ran a 4.47 40, 40-inch vertical leap. When you watched him in the 401 short shuttle, so the change of direction. This is a guy when you watch the film and time again, he would explode downhill and drop guys right around the line of scrimmage on a lot of the screens. Comes with that just drive, that intent, but the gauntlet. So confident in his hands, running full speed through that. One guy who looked like he was running at half speed was Chris Abrams-Drain, 5'11", 179. The hands, how confident are you in his hands? Ran a 4.44 40. I was expecting to see him run much faster through that gauntlet, but he was taking his time running through that, and so you wanted to see him pick up the pace a little bit, and you just worry about the hands there. Kalen King at 5'11", 191, This screams safety to me. Ran a 4.61 40. Did have that 37-inch vertical leap. Change of direction. What was there with the 4.16 short shuttle. But when I look at him, I still see safety when it's all said and done. I thought Dwight McLaughlin, at 6'2", 185, shorter arms for the bigger corner, but look, 4.47, for a bigger guy, that was definitely impressive. And then I watched Miles Harden out of South Dakota, 5'11", 195, 4.5 40, 6.88 3-cone drill, 3.98 short shuttles. Definitely, I mean, he looked explosive. He looked very smooth in the drills. He's a guy that teams have to be talking about because you saw, the ball skills were evident there for South Dakota. He's a guy to watch out for and is going to continue to move up draft boards. Takes us to the safeties. When you watch the safeties, there are a lot of guys that, I think, there were head turners for sure. I thought, Dadrian Taylor Demerson looked exceptionally smooth at 5'10", 197, ran a 4.4 140, 38-inch vertical leap. He's a guy to me that's really solidified his status as a day 2 pick. I thought, Kalen Bullock at 6'2", 188 out of USC, 4.48 40, 1.51 10-yard split, but you watched him in the drills, and he looks like a freaking corner. So smooth. And look, the safeties actually looked a heck of a lot better in the gauntlet. The corners did. Exceptional hands. Bullock is a guy that, because of the way he moves, he can end up being a corner. He's not overly physical at that safety position. He covers a lot of ground on the back end. So very intriguing prospect. I've got him moved up because the more I think about it, the coverability and his ability to make plays on the back end of the defense. Yes, he's not overly physical, but when you think about what he can do, he covers a ton of ground. He can be that center fielder for you. And yes, I think it was Daniel Jeremiah talking about him, or maybe it was Charles Davis on the broadcast talking about him at corner. I absolutely see that as well. A corner, they're not all going to be physical, and Bullock is definitely not that. But man, the length is absolutely there. This is a dude that is going to be a lot of fun to watch for sure at the next level. I think he'll be a playmaker. Cole Bishop, Utah. Didn't realize that this dude had the 4.45 speed, 39-inch vertical leap. The dude's got some bunnies to him. 6'2", 206. Definitely had an impressive day. 29 3/4 inch arms, so definitely on the shorter end there. But a guy that definitely looked athletic, very quick, in and out of his breaks. Jaden Hicks out of Washington State didn't run the 40, but 6'2", 211. I thought he was another guy that was able to get in and out of his breaks really well. You watched him in the 3-cone drill at a 6.88. So you like to see that change of direction for sure. Tyler Newman out of Minnesota, 6'1", 199. I think if there was a safety that is going to get drafted in round number 1, it's going to be Newman. I thought he looked exceptionally smooth in the drills, the ability to flip the hips. There's no stiffness there. The big thing that I look at with Newman is, what's that 40 time going to be? Because when we talk about safeties, and you look at guys that, come in on the back end of round number 1, all those guys, whether it's Daxton Hill, running a 4.38 40 in the 2022 Combine. One pick after that was Lewis Seen. He ran a 4.37. You think about Darnell Savage back in 2019, ran a 4.36. Jonathan Abram, also in that 2019 draft, ran a 4.45. So when you think about these safeties that have gone in the latter half of round 1, these are guys that are running in that 4.3, 4.4 range. What does Tyler Newman run? I think that's really going to go a long way towards solidifying his status as a round 1 safety. And then you look at a guy like Cam Kitchens. Cam Kitchens, surprising, ran a 4.65 40, a 35-inch vertical leap, which is, it's okay. Broad jump only 9.2. 5'11", 203. He plays a lot faster than that speed. He's a lot more athletic out on the field. Makes a ton of plays. Ball skills are evident. The instincts are evident. He's a guy, because of the eyes, because of the instincts, it allows him to play a lot faster. So the play speed is definitely much quicker than the athleticism that he showcased there at the Combine. 11 interceptions in his career, 15 pass breakups, 162 tackles in his 3 seasons with the Hurricanes. But when you talk about him again, you look at these guys, Kyle Hamilton, obviously there was a disappointment there at the Combine when he ran. And that really, there was a lot of talk there. He was supposed to be a first round, or not only a first round pick, but a top 10 pick. Should have been guaranteed, right? A 6'4", 220, ran a 4.59 40, ends up falling to the Baltimore Ravens at 14. They end up getting a steal, right? Cam Kinchens was already on the bubble for the first round. I think he falls a little bit. I look at Pittsburgh, I look at Green Bay. Both of those teams need a safety. Could they go there in round one? I don't know that that's going to happen. I think both of those guys will probably come off the board on day 2. I think the only guy that I think could end up seeing coming off the board on day 1 would be Tyler Nubin, but I think it's all going to be dependent upon what that 40 is at the Gophers Pro Day. Keaton Oladapo, look, 6'2", 216, 4.58 40. This is a guy that was a leader there for Oregon State. Athleticism, he's a bigger corner, but definitely athletic. Tyler Owens, I think turned heads. 41-inch vertical leap, 12.2 broad jump, ended up injuring himself. But 6'2", 216 as well. So you look at that explosiveness in comparison to Oladapo. Owens, not overly productive there with the Red Raiders, but a guy, when you look at that athleticism, that's something that's going to make you say, wow, I need to go back and take a look at things a little bit further with him. Jalen Simpson out of Auburn, 6 foot 179, 4.45 40, 1.51 10-yard split, 39.5-inch vertical leap, 11.1 broad jump. You look at the athleticism, and then you watch him in the drills. You watch the change of direction. You watch his ability to drive on the football, his ability to get his head around and locate the ball, so smooth and fluid in the gauntlet as well. Checks off all the boxes. This is a guy that was able to cover, played a little bit of corner, played all over the field there for Auburn. I think he's a guy that people are a little low on. I'm a lot higher on Jalen Simpson than I think a lot of people are. Dominique Hampton out of Washington, another bigger corner at 6'2", 215. A little bit of stiffness, I thought, at times when you saw him out on the field, but then you saw him there at the Combine. Runs a 6'8", 3-cone drill, 4.14 short shuttle, so the change in direction absolutely is there. 33.25-inch arms, 4.51 40. 39-inch vertical leap as well, so he's a guy that I think definitely helped his draft stock. You look at Jalen Carlisle, 6'3", 227. He's one of those guys that could be that tweener, be that linebacker type, right? When you look at a guy like Divine Diablo. So when you look at Carlisle, he ran a 4.5 40, 1.54, 10-yard split, 20 reps in the bench press, only a 32.5-inch vertical leap, 10.5 in the broad jump. But when I think about him and I think about Divine Diablo, and his ability to transition to that safety spot. Again, when you're looking at the Combine, you're looking at some of the numbers. Where's the comparison? Here's the thing. Diablo, 6'3", 226, 33-inch arms, 4.45 40, 1.63 10-yard split, 34-inch vertical leap, 10.6 broad jump. Very similar in a lot of ways to Carlisle. Carlisle has the longer arms, a little bit faster on the 40 time there with Diablo, but not by much. You look at the split, Carlisle's actually had him beat there. The vertical leap, that's where Diablo has him just a little bit. The broad jump, they're all virtually even. And then in the bench press, Carlisle was able to knock out 1 rep more than him, and Diablo was a third-round pick. So when you look at Carlisle, he's one of those guys that could end up falling in anywhere from 3rd to 5th round. I honestly believe that he's going to get drafted much higher than people are expecting. Javon Bullard out of Georgia, another guy that I thought definitely helped himself. 5'10", 198, 4.47 40, 1.51 10-yard split, but then you watched him in the drills, looks so smooth, so athletic, and he was right after Millard Bradford. Nook Bradford, ran really fast, 4.42 40 and 38-inch vertical leap. You see the athleticism, but I thought he struggled mightily in the drills. Had to repeat some drills. He struggled following direction, trying to get through everything. I thought he was just trying to go too fast at times. Got a little bit too over anxious. So there was some concern there watching him. Evan Williams out of Oregon, 5'11", 200, the transfer from Fresno State. 4.640, but he plays much faster. And 40.5-inch vertical leap. So you see the lower body explosiveness there out of him. Looks so smooth in the gauntlet, so confident, at full speed all the way through. You saw the playmaking ability at the Senior Bowl as well. James Williams, 6'4", 231 out of Miami. Ran a 4.65, 159, 10-yard split. Only a 30-inch vertical leap. When I was looking at athleticism, for these, he's a bigger corner, much like Jalen Carlisle. Carlisle's a much better athlete than Williams, and Williams just looks stiff. He looked very stiff, and so that's a huge concern for me when I look at that. So that's someone that I think there's going to be concern there. Tyke Smith, Georgia, 5'10", 202. Explosiveness was absolutely there. Ran a 4.46 40. You saw some good change of direction. You saw some good athleticism from him. So when I look at that safety group, obviously Newbin and I think Kitchens is still number 2. Kalen Bullock, I think to me, has moved up to number 3 with Dadrian Taylor Demerson right there at number 4. I think Simpson definitely helped himself. So it's an interesting group for sure. One last thing to mention with the DBs, and I didn't mention him, but a guy that was absolutely fast, and that was DeCamerion Richardson out of Mississippi State at 6'2", 188, 4.34 40, 1.48 10-yard split. He's going to send people back to watch that Bulldog film because the explosiveness, you want to watch that film again and say, you know what, did we get this right with him? Because at 6'2", running that fast, I think he got himself drafted. But when you look at it, the production, that was, look, 177 tackles in his career, three years there with the Bulldogs in Starkville, just 10 pass breakups, no interceptions. But the athleticism, is there, what do we have? Is there potential? We know that he's an athlete, but is he also a football player? So I think that's going to be a question mark, and I think that's going to send people back to some game film. And then finally, let's get to our tight ends real quick. Look, this was a smaller group. We've only got 16 tight ends, and no Brock Bowers, but I thought 6'3", 243, bigger than where his play weight was said to be at around 230. So he's put on a little bit of weight. We're gonna have to wait for the Georgia Pro Day to see what Brock Bowers can do. It's one of those things. Is he a top 5 pick? I don't see it. Really want to see just how athletic he is. He looks at times, especially against the man coverage, that he struggles. Once he gets the ball in his hands, he can be dynamic. But there are going to be some concerns and question marks, I think, there with his game. Number 2 on the list of tight ends, was Jatavion Sanders. And look, speed isn't really his game. But this is a guy that was able to get vertical on a lot of his routes, and a guy that has that power, the speed, the ability to make plays after the catch, the contact balance. You saw definite strength in his blocking, and watching him hit the sled. So I think he's definitely that number 2 tight end in the group. But there are definitely some other guys that turned heads. One of those has to be Ben Sinnott out of K-State, 6'4", 250, ran a 4.68 40, 40-inch vertical leap, ran that 3-cone drill in a 6.82. So definitely exceptionally quick, being able to get in and out of his breaks. Also an accomplished blocker, does a little bit of everything. Can line up at the H-back, he can be an inline tight end. I think he was split out at times there with the Wildcats, also in the slot. Whatever you need this guy to do, he could do it and does it at a high level. Before I go any further, let's talk about some of the tight ends in the, when I think of different tight ends and comparing them. You look at a guy like Travis Kelce, 6'4" and 7/8, 255, long arms, 33 3/4 inches, ran a 4.61 40, 1.61 10-yard split, 35-inch vertical leap, 10.4 broad jump. Okay, Rob Gronkowski at 6'6", 264, ran a 4.68 40, 33.5-inch vertical leap, 23 reps in the bench press. And then George Kittle 6'3 3/4, 247, so a little bit undersized. Ran a 4.5 240, 151 10-yard split, 38.5-inch vertical leap, 11-foot broad jump. And this was a guy that, look, only 48 receptions in his career. Why am I bringing this up? And really with Travis Kelce, had just one big year there at Cincinnati, right? 45 catches, 722 yards, 8 touchdowns. There are some guys out here that I think will be much better pros than they were in college, right? I think one of those guys I'm looking at is Tip Ryman. 41 catches in his career, 420 yards, and 5 touchdowns. This was a guy that was primarily used as a blocker. When I look at Tip Ryman, he measured in at 6'5", 271, 32 and 7/8-inch arms, ran a 4.6 440 with a 1.55 10-yard split. Vertical leap, look, 35.5, but put up 225 28 times. Looks incredibly thick, and he outweighed any other tight end in this group. I think the closest to him was Brevin Spann-Ford at 260 pounds. And he's an inch and a half taller than him, but still ran that 4.6 440. So obviously a guy that has much better athleticism and that acceleration. That 10-yard split, he got up to speed much quicker than a lot of these other guys getting out of the blocks. Man. You think about some of those blockers, and we look at a lot of these guys. He ran that 4.64. That's close to the Kelce range, right? That's in that Gronkowski range. It's not quite to the George Kittle 4.52, but he's bigger, and you just wonder just how quick he could be. And without sacrificing the power, he's 271 now. If he gets into that 255 range, 255, 260. Just how fast could Ryman be? He's one of those intriguing guys. And I think he'd be a much better pro than he showcased there in college. Theo Johnson out of Penn State, 6'6", 259. Ran a 4.5 740, 1.55 10-yard split, 39.5-inch vertical leap, 4.19 short shuttle. Theo Johnson, to me, overshadowed a bit by Tyler Warren. Solid blocker, and then you saw, even in the drills, you watched him, stayed over the toes. You didn't see a lot of the slipping with a lot of the routes that some of these other guys had. Very smooth operator, and definitely has that size. And then 33-inch arms, which is long enough. He's a guy to me that I think has solidified his status as a top 4 tight end. Cade Stover out of Ohio State, 6'4", 247, ran a 4.65 40. His game. He's not going to be a speed merchant by any means, but he's physical. He's a tough guy. He's a guy that's basically going to be more of a vertical threat. He's not a guy that's going to necessarily juke you out and set you up and make you look silly or anything like that in the open field. But look, when you look at the short shuttle, right? We're talking about that. Ran a 4.45. What did Travis Kelce run? A 4.42. Ran a 4.61 at 6'4 and 7/8, 255. Cade Stover, 6'4", 247, ran a 4.65, 159, 10-yard split. Kelce's 10-yard split, a 1.61. So just giving some comparison there, Kelce was a third-round pick, and you look at that comparison there. Cade Stover is right in that wheelhouse. And so when you think about guys in the open field, Cade Stover didn't have to do that a ton, but the athleticism, you just see some of those comparisons. How about Tanner McLaughlin there out of Arizona, 6'5", 244, very intriguing prospect, 4.61 40, 158 10-yard split, excellent blocker, but he was also the safety valve for those guys there at Arizona. Whether it was Jaden DeLora or Noah Fifita at quarterback. Look, they had Teteroa McMillan, they had Jacob Cowling at receiver, so it's kind of silly to say, well, Tanner McLaughlin was the safety valve. But this was a dude, he knew where to be, he knew how to get open for his quarterbacks, and he was that safety valve, that safety net, time and time again. And again, you look at it, what did Travis Kelce do? Travis Kelce, a lot of times, not only was he the focal point of the offense, but a lot of times he was going to be that guy that Patrick Mahomes was looking for when he got in trouble. Obviously, Noah Fifita has that chemistry already built up with Tedderell McMillan going back to their high school days and even before that. But he got comfortable real quick with Tanner McLaughlin, and I thought he looked very smooth in a lot of the drills, planning and cutting, and looked really solid. AJ Barner did run a 40, but 6'6", 251, excellent size. Getting more into that Gronkowski type range. Want to see what that 40 time is ultimately going to be. Look pretty smooth in the drills. Good blocker. Then on the flip side, well, before that, Jared Wiley at 6'6", 249, ran a 4'6", 240. More of that build-up speed at a 162, 37-inch vertical leap, though. When you look at him, he's a guy that's going to be a red zone nightmare. That's one of the things that TCU utilized him to success. He's not a guy that's going to necessarily, they were looking to stretch the field with him, but ran much faster. He's more of a straight line guy than anything else when I think about him, but definitely an intriguing guy, to say the least. Now on the flip side, Dallin Holker out of Colorado State, 6'3", 241, so a little bit on the undersized side, ran a 4'7", 840, 166, 10-yard split. So not overly explosive, but then at the same time, how does he win? He wins with a lot of his route running. So 3-cone drill, 6'8", 4.21, short shuttle as well. So among the fastest in this entire group in both of those. So may not be overly explosive with that straight line speed, but he sets you up and runs those solid routes. And then you have to think about one of the funniest moments of the Combine in the gauntlet. Forgets that he's got an additional pass coming to him, rather than throwing the other football away because he's already turning up the field to he's tucking it away. Makes the one-handed grab, ends up heading down the field with 2 footballs. So that was one of the funnier moments for sure. When you think about it. But Brevin Spanford, 6'6.5", 260 pounds, ran a 4'7", 740, 31.5-inch vertical leap, 7.38 3-cone drill. Just looked slower, plodding, definitely concerning there. He'll be a late day 3 guy. This is a guy that struggled at times with his hands as well. So as a red zone option, that's going to be a concern. Jaheim Bell, 6'2", 241. Right? And what was I saying? I thought that this was a guy that could end up falling into that Brevin Jordan conversation. So Brevin Jordan was 6'3", 245 at the Combine. I'm sorry, it was 6'2", 5'8", 247. Runs that 4'6", 740 with a 159 10-yard split. So Bell was a little bit faster, 4'6", 158. Vertical leap, virtually identical. But I look at Jaheim Bell, he kind of falls into that same category for me. 5th round, that's where Brevin Jordan ended up coming off the board. That's probably where Jaheim Bell is going to come off the board as well. And then Devin Culp is kind of the big surprise, right? 6'3", 231, undersized guy, wasn't utilized nearly as often there at Washington. Jack Westover was the guy that was getting the bulk of the attention, but splash plays. He was a guy that was definitely explosive, and you saw that there at that with the 40 of a 4.47, 155 10-yard split. Definitely a guy that's going to be sending people back to the film. There's not a ton, of production, but definitely the explosiveness jumps out for sure. So that kind of encapsulates the first 2 days of the Combine. And so I think when you think about the defense, we'll save the tight ends for the offensive conversation, but when you think about the defense, and we're talking about first-round picks, post-Combine, because there are so many offensive players, how many guys on defense are truly going to be drafted in round number 1? We know for a fact that we're going to have 4 edge rushers, right? With Jared Verse and Dallas Turner leading the way. Then you have Laiatu Latu and Chop Robinson. Potentially Darius Robinson there making that number 5, right? We know that Byron Murphy is going to be a first rounder there at D tackle. Johnny Newton should also be in that conversation as well. That's 2 D tackles. Linebackers, Edgerrin Cooper is the one guy that has a shot, but I just don't know, because linebacker is devalued. I just don't know that that's going to happen. I think the Steelers, they need an inside backer for sure, but I think they could probably get a linebacker on day 2 of the draft. I think they're going to go either offensive line or potentially go with the corner there at number 20 overall. If they want a linebacker, they're probably going to trade down. I think there's some other needs there, so they would address that linebacker position on day 2. So if you're doing the math so far, we've got 7 between the ends and the D tackles. We get to the cornerback position, and I think that we know for sure that we're going to have 4. And that's going to be Quinyon Mitchell, Terrion Arnold, Cooper DeJean, Nate Wiggins. Kool-Aid McKinstry is a guy that I think his draft stock's fallen a bit. We haven't seen him work out. We're going to see him at Bama's Pro Day. He's a guy that can get into that conversation as well. That's another 5. So with McKinstry, potentially 6. Ennis Rakestraw, what does that look like there? I think it's trending more towards Rakestraw being a second rounder. But when you look at it, so that's 12. If we throw in Rakestraw, that's 13. But we'll stick with 12 for now. Then the safety spot, I just don't see enough room for Tyler Newman or Cam Kinchens. You look at Green Bay, and I think that's really the spot. Potentially Buffalo as well, depending on what happens with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. Obviously, they need a receiver. They could even go center, looking to potentially replace Mitch Morse, depending on what happens with both Graham Barton and Jackson Powers Johnson. They can decide to wait until day 2, get up a guy like Hunter Norzad or Zach Frazier. Those are 2 guys that we could be seeing coming off the board day 2. I don't know that that's going to happen for any of the safeties. So when you think about it, flip side, quarterbacks. And we're going to be talking about all of these guys in the next podcast, but just to play this out. Quarterbacks, we can have between 4 and 6 quarterbacks taken. Wide receivers, we can have as many as 7. Tight ends, we know Brock Bowers is going to be there as well. So if we took the over there, then you're already talking about 14 players just within the skill positions, right? If we even look at the more conservative approach, we're still looking at 11. So 11 to 13 just in that group, right? So then we move on to the offensive line. And there could be as many as 6 tackles that come off the board in round 1 with another 3 interior linemen. The wide receivers, the offensive line group, very deep classes. So when we look at this, with the way that the numbers play out, there's just not going to be enough room to play into some of those scenarios. So I think a guy like Darius Robinson, obviously when we're looking at need, and but if we're talking about just best overall player, I think then you look at both safeties probably not in the mix. Ennis Rakestraw may fall. I think you're also looking at Darius Robinson. I think the linebacker position probably doesn't come into play. I don't know that Devondre Sweat is going to have enough to get into that first day. So there are going to be a lot of defensive players, a lot of talented guys that we're going to be seeing coming off the board on day 2 of the draft. And it's really going to be exciting to see just how that plays out, and really going to be excited to see what that free agency period looks like as well, because this is a quarterback heavy, wide receiver heavy, and O-line heavy draft early on. Now the quarterback group as a whole, not very deep. Wide receiver very deep. Offensive line also very deep. But they're loaded at the top of the draft as well. So I think there are the sure things. And then any of those fringe players, I think, unless we really see some action free agency towards that the latter half of round number 1, I just don't know that we're going to be seeing that many guys on that defensive side of the football, getting drafted. Probably looking at the end of the day, 4 edge rushers, 2 defensive tackles, and then 5 corners. So that's 11 to 12. When you think about it, 32 picks in round number 1. So you're talking about as many as 20, 21, 22 offensive players. And, that's something that is not out of the realm of possibility when we look at this draft class. So we'll go ahead and wrap things up here for the defensive side. We're going to go ahead and get another podcast together coming up shortly with the offensive side of the football. But, man, we're right in the thick of things with the pre-draft process. Obviously, we're going to have some individual workouts. Free agency already starting to take place with the legal tampering period, and really want to see as things kick off, guys getting signed, what's it going to all look like. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of movement, and really draft boards are really going to start taking shape as free agency gets further and further down the road. So until next time, everyone, for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Take care, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. And until next time, I am out.